Welcome to the Sound of Movement podcast tribe. Today and this week, we're going deep into injury rehabilitation. We're kicking this discussion off on the massive and very, very important discussion of pain science. I have a brilliant physiotherapist across the table from me to join in on the discussion. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the show. If this is your first time joining us, my name is Yanni. Across the table from me, I have Phil White, co-founder of ADPT Physiotherapy. They are partnered with Unity Gym and the Unified Movement System. Behind the mixer, we have Richard, the voice of God, sexiest man in the room, however you want to remember him. And we are Unity Gym, and as I said, the Unified Movement System. We take driven people and turn them into athletes. We're very passionate about it. And this week, we're very passionate about talking about pain science, injury rehab, and all of the great stuff that goes with that. It's going to be a wicked series, so strap yourself in. How are you, Phil?
Good. Love this series. I'm really glad to be back. It's my favorite thing to do, which is trying to basically talk myself out of a job. So if you guys can get a lot of this stuff right, then hopefully you won't need to see a physio, and that's the goal. So.
That is it. That is and this is Phil's series, man. This is him. This is his bread and butter. That's why he's taken the front row seat. We kicked right off the table today. We have enough good-looking people in the room. We need to balance it out with brains now.
For those who are watching on the UMS Movement Mastermind group on the video or on YouTube later, I am not actually a tiny person. So
that's right.
That fisheye camera really.
That's right. Absolutely.
Makes me
we do have a little bit of a weird camera going on though, where Phil's a bit cut out from the shot. I'm not sure whether that's normal or not, but we might be able to zoom back and get him all in there. Yeah. But speaking of which, everyone who's listening to the podcast, and also you might be watching the replay on YouTube, lots of love to you guys. Smash the like button and leave us a comment in the comment section if you just want to see maybe Richie's shirtless body one day. I don't know. We'll see. But we want to get you guys over and invite you to join the UMS Movement Mastermind. I can see we got Joe there. Joe is actually a member of our Unity Gym tribe here. We got a bunch of people on the live stream.
Asking where your beard is.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, mate, I am fresh. Yeah, I've had a shave over the weekend, and that's another thing you get to see if you join the group.
Imagine. So
get over there, join the group, and even Joseph Gilbert said, "Shirtless body, come on." You know, you can. It's free to join. You can jump over to the Facebook group and then interact with us live, ask us questions, and that's what this week is going to be big on. We really want to invite you guys to ask us questions. So I'm going to kick this off with a question of the day, and Richie can type this out for me. We want to know if you're dealing with any sort of pain or injury right now, and if you are, let us know in the comments section, and maybe we can give you a little bit of guidance there. We can't give you like a full-on consultation. That's not legal for us to do that. If you want to do that, I can get you hooked up with Phil and Nilesh online, but we can certainly give you a little bit of help and support. Yeah. So smash the like button if you think that's a good idea, and let's kick this thing off with a story. I love stories.
I know you do.
Phil's going to take the mic in a sec, so I got to get a little bit in. So first of all, I want to just share my experiences with pain science and injury identity that we're going to go deeper on Thursday. Many of you would know, if you followed me for a while, that my most severe injury, I've had many of them, but the worst one was a fall from a horse where I broke my back. I had one of my legs caught in a stirrup, and it actually caused quite a rare fracture to two of the vertebrae of my spine. It's referred to as a spiral fracture, and it's usually due to like a compressive load. You might be able to explain that better, but essentially what I was explained when it was explained to me, and you have to forgive me because it happened a long time ago, but I was bouncing up and down with one leg caught in the stirrup as the horse rode, and that sort of compression, as you may, from my hips to my rib cage, caused a lot of pressure on a couple of the lumbar vertebra, and that's what caused the problem. And it obviously, like anything, it caused me a lot of problems growing up, a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort. And, you know, essentially back then, it happened in around 1986. I was sort of told that I'd be very limited in the things that I couldn't do. And as a result, I feared a lot of exercise. And I was just sort of seeing physios and chiropractors on a regular basis, which eventually turned into to just a chiropractor twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday. Went in, got a few cracks, and his ethos was that if my parents didn't keep sending me to the chiropractor, like a tree, when a sapling is growing to find the sun, the trunk of the tree will bend. And he used to say, if we don't keep straightening my spine will bend as I grow, and I'll essentially form a deformity in my spine, and it would be catastrophic to my physical development and all that. So my parents, they signed on the dotted line and had me going there twice a week for 8 years. And it was pretty ridiculous. I'd just go in and crack. Anyway, that really played into this notion that I had a compromised body. And when it came time to exercise, I, was really told to avoid certain things. And they turned out to be the things that saved me, And all through this period, I had an ongoing 2 steps forward, 3 steps back process where I'd feel okay, and then I'd go into a really severe spasm, and the spasms were so severe that it would leave me lying in the fetal position on the ground. It was very, very uncomfortable, which again played into this notion that I had a severely compromised body, And all throughout that time, my exercise, I was boxing, and so you would say, yeah, that's a quite intense exercise, but I still had these problems, and it was a real limiting factor. And it wasn't until my early 20s when I started to get into sort of little bit of strength training and weightlifting. I had a very frail body. Despite being a boxer, I was so skinny, like super, super skinny. There was very little muscle on me. At that point in time, I was around 70 kilos. If you look at me now, I'm about 88 kilos. And I was rough. I'd finished my growing. I was as tall as I am now, but I was 20 kilos less almost in muscle mass, So you can imagine I was really skinny. You could see every rib. And yeah, what really knocked me for six was that I got to a point where I was so frustrated with my training that I was so frustrated with my back pain that I formed an all or nothing mentality. I was like, well, what do I have to lose, And I ended up friends with a good friend of mine, even now, Sebastian Oreb, who is Australian strength coach. And, I was watching these guys power lift, and I just had avoided deadlifts and squats like the plague. I just couldn't do them very well, and they seemed to trigger this spasm in my back. And he challenged me after we'd gone to do a certification together with Charles Poliquin, where they were doing these snatch grip deficit deadlifts, which is a really extreme deadlift. Anyone who doesn't know it can Google it. We've got great videos on it on our YouTube channel. And it's where you really put the lower back through excessive load. But the idea is that you deload it and manage
range.
Excessive range. Well, I call it excessive load if you look at the macro, because range of motion is one way of loading the body. We'll get to that. We're actually going to talk about that tomorrow. But it really is designed to challenge the body with very controlled load, very controlled intensities, and then restore your strength or build strength. And quite alarmingly, and we're going to explain this in more detail, the very thing that I'd feared and avoided for so many years because of my injury, my pain, and my injury identity became my savior. And over this week, we're going to drill deep into why that happens and why it's so important and potentially going to be the missing link or the revelation, just like it was for me, for many of you out there who are suffering from ongoing pain or mismanaged pain. And often, the chiro, in my case, and I'm not slamming chiros, I have many friends who are chiropractors, and they do great things for me and our clients and physios. But often they can play into this injury identity, the whole system, the whole model, and we might throw some stones and talk about that a bit later too. So from a physiological and biological standpoint, I'm going to get Phil to do his absolute best to explain what was going on for me and what is probably going on for many of you out there and why this is such a big problem. And I'm going to do my very best, and Phil's going to do his very best to keep this colloquial?
Clear. We want it to be really clear, concise, understandable. So if you do have any questions or things that are just going over your head, please do let us know in the comments or send us an email. Where I want to start this off, and I think the best way to sort of think about it is if we imagine, we're going to use Yanni as the example here, but we're going to have two different Yannis. So we're going to have current Yanni, who's been a personal trainer for the last however many years, forever.
17 years.
Yep. And, now he's more in the office, but he still trains hard with a personal training background. And then we'll think of, the most opposite job to that. So we'll just say like a total desk job, And maybe something that I guess I was going to say accountant, but you're a thruffer for you love a bit of accounting now.
I was an engineer before I was a trainer,
Yeah.
so I probably would have ended up at a desk job designing things or doing something like that.
Let's call you I'll call you an accountant just to keep things simple, at a desk all day, every day. So we're going to use those two people as an example and see how maybe the journey could have gone a bit differently. But to start off, I'm just going to give a really kind of brief overview of pain science and sort of where the current thinking is. So the best way to sort of think about pain is actually that it's your body's perceived threat. So it's your brain is constantly making assessments about how to keep you safe, and then when you get stimulus from your body that kind of suggests it's going to go into something that could cause you harm, then often that's when you're going to experience a pain experience. So that's a really key thing to understand, is that you don't actually have pain receptors. So around your body, there's not on your skin, in your bones, there's not something that when you activate it, a nerve that when you activate it, you're not going to necessarily experience pain from that stimulus. What you do have is all around your body, you have millions upon millions of nerves that give you different information around sort of soft touch, light touch, pressure, temperature, and then you have something called nociceptive signaling. So, and what nociceptive signaling is basically when a tissue is damaged. So you do a little muscle tear, you have a little, a paper cut on your skin or any cut on your skin. Your body can get the information that there's basically some damage to that area. But what's really key to understand is just because you have that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be experiencing pain. So what happens is you basically get all this information. So think about all those different nerve signals as information that then passes from around your body, goes towards your spinal cord, and then at your spinal cord, depending on the state of your body. So if you're in a really high adrenaline state, so you're like fight or flight, you're trying to run from your life from a lion, then you're probably not going to want to know about that little paper cut you just got on your arm. So basically your body will sort of turn down the signal and you'll have less information going up. Whereas on the other hand, if you're in a state maybe like accountant Yanni would be, where he's just done a really long day at the office and he's didn't have time for lunch, so he ate a bunch of food that's probably not great for him and stayed up too late the night before, just trying to find some escapism and watching Netflix until late at night, and then had a crappy sleep because he maybe had a few too many drinks the night before. Basically, that can put your system, so your metabolic system, in a state of in a inflammatory state or a less than ideal state. And what that's going to do at the spinal cord level is basically turn all that information up. So you're basically, it's like turning up the volume on a speaker. Basically, you're getting more information going up towards your brain. And then when all that information, depending on whether it's gone up and down, will get to your brain, and then your brain is going to kind of make an assessment on all that information and use sort of use some other information, so like context of where you are, what you're doing, your previous experiences, and then the output of all that information that's come from your nerves through your spinal cord and been filtered through your brain is then going to be an experience of pain. Now, it seems pretty wild because it happens, often quite instantaneously, but that's how pain works.
Isn't it amazing? Who was the prick that came up with pain receptors? Like,
yeah,
where was that term coined?
It just makes it seems like it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's totally understandable because if you just pinch yourself, like you're like, oh yep, that I do this stimulus and I get a response that is pain. But it's not until that hardcore neuroscientists really drilled down and like looked at what each of the nerves do, and that's when people figured out, oh wait, actually it's all information, and that all sort of, and then it's this sort of, with this pain understanding, it's like a mixture of kind of classical neuroscience and then also psychology about and they've sort of figured out that that's how it works.
Well, the booklet, the little booklet, the welcome pack that we got from I'm going to say his name, Ian Deneen, the old chiropractor, because I like really have a gripe against this whole system and this guy. I've done it, or I've said it. I'll probably get sued. he gave us this little booklet, and on the first page of this booklet, it was like, what will happen, essentially, I can't remember the exact words, but it was along the lines of what will happen if you don't see a chiro in your situation. And it had an image, a picture of a sapling, in a pot that had grown like that, with a essentially an S curve in it. And then it went into a whole, information about how it's so important that when you've had an injury like mine and you're experiencing back pain, that you continually straighten the spine as it grows, so that it makes sure that during your adolescence it grows straight and you don't have some form of obvious physical deformity, which I will say, because I know this term, like scoliosis, as though scoliosis is going to form if I don't go and get my back manipulated every week, and that seemed logical to me and my parents at the time. You kind of think, well, yeah, that makes some sort of sense, but it's total bullshit.
Yeah, and it's, you kind of hope to give this guy a benefit of the doubt, that chiropractor, that, that was just his true understanding of how things worked at the time. And it's, it's so common, you look back on things that we used to do and think like, oh, we got that one wrong. Like,
yeah.
The understanding does change over time. But if there's one thing that's going to increase your perceived threat of how your spine functions, it's going to be seeing
a picture of a bent sapling and thinking, holy fuck, that's really going to happen to my spine,
Exactly.
And the thing that used to shock me about those treatments is that there was never a discussion about any exercise, go and do some strength exercise, or go and do this, or go and do that. And it wasn't actually until I got introduced to a friend of ours who's a personal trainer, someone different, Aaron McKenzie, who really had chiseled his business, like a niche business around really helping people overcome quite severe injuries and things like that back then. And then he moved later into more performance and stuff like that. And he famously had worked with Anthony Minicello after he had quite severe spinal injuries, especially in his neck from playing rugby league, and trained and became very close friends with Aaron, and then eventually went back and replayed rugby league at the highest level after he was written off after having spinal operations and stuff like that, surgery. And that kind of gave Aaron put him in the spotlight about what he was doing, and he was similar. He was like, you just got to move, you got to get out of the body's way and get it moving, and motion is lotion. All these things we're going to talk about later on, but these sort of terms, the pain receptor and this and that, people form these really strong dogmatic beliefs around this is the way the body works.
Yeah, and it's why I'm often quipping from the back seat and being really particular about language, because language is exactly what then goes into that, when I was talking about how your brain then processes all this information you get from your body, it's the words we use and it's the experiences that we've had before that drive that context, which then either turns up or turns down your ultimate pain experience from that information.
We talked about this at the Fast Growth Workshop on Saturday, and what I go deep into in our motivation content that we teach, that we're making into an online course, by the way, shameless plug, that the things you think about, and then to take it even to a higher level, the things you talk about legitimize your beliefs, and on a biological level are actually laying down more fat tissue on the brain's neurons to make those thought processes stronger. So they become stronger and stronger and stronger thought processes that create these feedback loops that really can govern your behavior, your actions, and then as a result more thoughts in the future. So, and we talk about the fact that you can actually reprogram and rewire all this stuff so that you think differently and therefore behave differently.
And this is where the current sort of thinking around pain science is going, and Lorimer Moseley, who's a professor of neuroscience, he's kind of the most famous guy in this area. He's just got an Order of Australia medal, which is a big deal in Australia for his contributions to pain science. But he's sort of going, like, looking at that kind of classical conditioning route, which is like Pavlov's dog, where you ring a bell and the dog starts salivating. Basically looking at that same sort of space for pain, and basically having like a like a biological stimulus, so something that happens that then creates like an outsized response in the body, and that's where the sort of pain science is going. But I'm going to keep things away from the deep dive of what's new and
as much
exciting
as we'd like
different.
to charge off
And
into the rabbit hole.
I want to give you guys really practical information. So I want to make sure that you guys understand that like pain is a really useful thing, and pain in an acute injury context is great. Like, it's exactly what we need, because it's all about perceived threat, and it's a kind of think about pain as your protective buffer. So if you roll your ankle and you hurt your, the outside of your ankle hurts, then that's a good reason to then try and spend a bit of time off your foot and just for a while to let things heal. And then over the course of, an ankle sprain might take sort of a couple, like maybe a week if it's really bad, to be able to weight bear. And then over the next few 3 to 6 weeks, the tissues will heal up. We understand tissue healing times, and you can easily kind of find out, for ligaments, bones, muscles, how long that should take. But it's when you start getting pain after that time, and it becomes a chronic or persistent pain, that's when pain is no longer useful, and now there's a mismatch between the stimulus and the response. And so if we're going back to Yanni and his horse riding example, like if we imagine if we talk about the actual Yanni, which then went on to have went into boxing, so straight away you've gone from being like, okay, severe back injury, but instead of quitting sport altogether, you got back, you got involved in sport again, went down the route of becoming a personal trainer, and think about boxing, it's a pretty badass sport. You probably think that you're a pretty tough person if you're into boxing. You're not, so that's like an identity that's not fragile. Yeah. So you're not constantly worried. If you were totally worried about your spine falling to bits, you wouldn't be boxing. And then going into the personal training and talking to Sebastian or about deadlifting and starting to get into your weights training, and you did that under the guidance of some people who really knew their shit, and had great technique, did pretty decent sort of loading parameters to start doing those exercises. And eventually moving to do those snatch, grip, deficit deadlifts, which, as we talked about, are basically taking it through full range and loading up full range. Just about going through all of that and coming away with a back that feels strong. And now what's your PB with the deadlift? 230 odd. So all of those, that progression of getting really strong, and not only does that obviously create a good sort of active dynamic stability around your spine, but what it does to your brain is say hey, my back is strong. If I can lift up 230 kilos, then now the threat of bending over and picking up a pen is no longer scary. But if we think about rewind back to Yanni, who after having that injury and thinking that he was a little sapling that was going to turn into a wonky tree, if he thought, oh geez, I better not do boxing because that could make my back worse, and went down the route of becoming going to uni, becoming an accountant, spending all day at a desk, and maybe you'd, instead of going to the gym and having active hobbies, maybe you'd got really into Dungeons and Dragons or computer games or whatever, all of these things, fine hobbies, but not creating a strength and stability around your spine. And then down now at the age of, what are you, 40 now?
Yeah.
So imagine now if you'd put on, instead of staying muscly and putting on 20 kilos of muscle, instead you'd put on 20 kilos of fat. Now suddenly not only is your metabolic system going to be in a less than ideal state, so that therefore, remember we talked about the information being sent from your periphery, so your limbs, wherever you experience the the stimulus, to your spinal cord level. At the spinal cord level, that less than ideal metabolic state, from sleep deprivation and stress and poor diet, that's going to get amplified, so you're going to get more information sent up to your brain. And then as your brain's figuring out all the context around movement, so if we talk about, bending over, now you've not got all those sort of experiences of being strong, deadlifting, being active, boxing. You've got a mentality of, you just remember those times where you've gone to, help your kid and you felt your back twinge, or you've had to lay down for a couple of days at a time after hurting your back doing something fairly innocuous. Suddenly you've got this context that is a context of fragility, basically. And so any sort of information that's being sent from your back when you've whenever you're bending is now going to be generalized to then be threatening. And remember that pain is perceived threat, so you're going to you're going to listen to those signals too much, and you're going to experience pain.
So just quickly, we're going to stay on for about another 10 minutes because we started a bit late today, and we're going to get to the comments section, and I'm going to go through and check out if there's any questions there, and we'll just give some love to people who are active in the comments section. But before we do that, I want to just spend a couple of minutes really clarifying what we want you to take away from today's show, because this week, tomorrow, we're going to go into why most injuries are caused by poor load management, and we're going to really help you guys understand the concept of load management. We're going to go through the difference between macro and micro loading and why technique in your lifting matters so much. We're going to also talk about how overcoming an injury identity and cultivating a performance mindset is critical if you really do want to take yourself out of that environment where you feel compromised. And then finally, at the end of the week, we're going to talk about why we don't believe rest is best when you're injured. We think motion is lotion. We're going to really go deep into all of this. But today, what we want you guys to understand, and it's hard for some people, especially when you're stuck in that cycle of being in pain, you know. We want you to understand that on the very base level, when you injure yourself from a traumatic injury or an acute injury, pain is very useful. And at that point, you do need to really pay attention. You know, it's usually signaling that there's something very wrong and that we do not want to either repeat what's just happened, or we want to create an environment that's best for healing that process,
think about that
injury.
protective buffer that I talked about before. If you're in a lot of pain, you're going to feel like, if you're feeling a lot of pain, that's basically a sign that, like, you know, in an acute stage, that you want to look after that.
Yeah. Then from there, you know, and depending on the tissues that are damaged in that injury, tissues remodel and heal at different rates. Bones generally take the longest. You've got connective tissues that are a bit quicker than bones. They're the deeper tissues that are sort of joining bone to bone, cartilage and ligaments. Yep. And then muscles and flesh and tendons and skin, they all heal the quickest. Okay.
Not tendons, sorry.
Not tendons, yeah. Muscles and skin, they heal the quickest. And usually muscles and skin will heal within a matter of weeks, 2 to 6 weeks, we would say, you know, depending on the severity of the injury. And so, you know, once you go beyond that point, let's say you've done a muscle tear, and after 6 weeks, that tear is, unless you've recurringly opened it up and injured it over and over again, and it becomes somewhat of a sort of a chronic injury, that is healed, that's done. And if you're still experiencing pain from that injury, it is no longer serving you at that point. And so, you know, like when we have the acute injury or the traumatic injury where it is serving you, it's telling you, hey, stay off this ankle, you've rolled it, it needs time to heal. We now need to start to figure out whether that pain is real and is actually...
real is not quite the right word there, because all pain is real.
Well,
like,
useful. Yeah, that's right.
You know, people will really be quite rejective of this idea if you say, hey, your pain's not real.
Pain is
absolutely an experience, and if you're experiencing it, it's 100% real.
Yeah.
But whether or not it's useful, that's the thing.
And then there becomes this concept of, okay, well, maybe, and this was definitely the situation for my situation, maybe I actually need to figure out a way of training through that pain experience, because what I need is strength, and I need to convince my body that it is okay. Strength comes in different facets. It comes in the literal strengthening of the muscle and hypertrophy of the muscle tissue itself. It comes in the adaptations that happen in the nervous system, but it also comes on a psychological level where you start to really believe that you're strong, and your brain starts to believe that you're strong, and it can then turn down those pain signals. And
pain signals. Remember, there are no pain signals.
Pain. How did you
inflammation?
Inflammation. Okay. Information.
Information.
Yep. Pain volume. Let's call it. Okay. Information.
Turn down the pain experience.
And this is really important to understand, because when we often get a lot of backlash when we say that pain is an experience, a symptom of the brain, and people say that's bullshit. You know, I have pain in my knee. How is it an experience or a symptom of the brain? Well, everything that you're experiencing,
in the Matrix, man.
Yeah, you're in the Matrix. Everything you're experiencing is a symptom of your brain, and you do need to understand. And this is where this becomes very beneficial for a lot of people. You know, if you've got a chronic injury that's been going for a long time, we are not here to tell you that is not an issue, you know, but the thing that is most probably going to heal or fix that issue is not laying up on your back and avoiding moving it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, this idea, you know, obviously is a bit challenging when you first start learning about it, but it's so exciting, because it basically means that, like, if you can provide a kind of context where you can move from being in, you know, like a, you know, worried and constantly like overly conscious about your injury, and if you can kind of work with someone who can help you get, like, the term is sort of pacing in exercise is basically starting to reintroduce things in a gradual way where you start off, nice and easy, but you go to a point where you basically stop listening to pain and you keep training through it. But basically, if you can use exercise to change your mindset, then you can really get great positive results. And there's still so much research being done into the space, and it's a really challenging area to do research in, unfortunately, because of, well, actually probably fortunately, because of scientific ethics. Like pain is a challenging one to do tests where you because with something being perceived threat, if you know that you're going to a study, you know that you're never actually going to be in danger, so then the whole threat issue becomes a bit challenging, and you can't really cause people insane amounts of pain, which is good. But yeah, it's a challenging space for the evidence to say, like, hey, that's 100% right. But yeah, it's all moving in this sort of direction. And I'd just like to tell a little anecdote that I think helps kind of people get this a bit more, which is the kind of classic story of this a construction worker who stepped on a giant nail. It was a really long nail, and it went through his boot, through his foot, and straight up through the top of his shoe. And so obviously absolutely freaked out. It was an excruciating pain looking down, seeing this nail pointing up straight through his shoe. And his co-workers freaked out. They called the ambulance. They got an ambulance over there, and then they really carefully cut away his boot. He was screaming every single time that any sort of movement happened, in a whole lot of pain. And then as soon as they'd sort of cut the boot away and looked at, ready to see the kind of gory scene of a nail sticking right through his foot, they realized it had actually gone through between his big toe and his first toe. Big toe and his second toe. And so the nail had actually just gone through the middle of the toes, not penetrating skin at all. Yeah. But you can totally imagine being in that scenario where you're seeing this nail sticking through your foot, knowing, just how, you can imagine how painful that would be, knowing you'd have to go get a tetanus shot, thinking you'd probably,
may need an operation.
Have a hole in your foot for the rest of your life. You can totally understand how in that time your perceived threat would be through the roof. Yeah. And so he was feeling real pain, extreme pain, until suddenly the information showed that, there was no perceived threat there, and the main experience he was feeling was, guilty and a bit, a bit embarrassed, and suddenly his pain totally goes away. So I think that's just a really good anecdote to kind of illustrate that perceived threat. And that is a real story. It's not just a little
And I'm sure we can all relate to a scenario where, kids are a classic example of this, where you hurt yourself and you don't actually feel the pain or cry until you see the blood coming out of your body. I had a really bad injury a few years ago where I came off my mountain bike, and on the way through, my shin hit the chain cog, which is very sharp on a racing mountain bike, and it just literally severed the anterior tibialis tendon in the shin, and caused quite a deep laceration right down to the bone, where it was went in on an angle, so it kind of almost was like a miniature degloving, where it peeled off and you could just see everything going on in there. And it's interesting, I got up off my bike because I'd gone over the handlebars and I'd hit the ground really hard, and I got up and I went to take a step to look at the damage of my bike. And then when I put weight on that leg, I felt that something gave out because I didn't have that tendon. That tendon was about 80% severed, and so my foot didn't work properly. And it wasn't until I looked down at my shin that I experienced any pain.
This is such a good example of your spinal cord level versus your brain level there, because basically when you injure yourself really badly like that, you get flooded with adrenaline. You get that's the fight or flight response, is getting flooded with adrenaline. And that basically what that's doing is hey, something bad has happened and you've got to save yourself from this situation. So we're going to turn the signaling, turn all that information right down, because you're screwed, and we don't want some little issue to stop you. If you stub your toe or you stepped on a little a bindi, which is a little sharp plant, at that time, your body would not care, because you basically something bad's happened, we've got to figure this out. And so basically what's happened there is your spinal cord's gone nope, turn it right down, and then you take it for a couple of steps, and that makes you look at your foot, and now you've got the context of like, ooh, something gave way there, that's not right.
Yeah.
Then you look down and see, a bunch of flesh hanging off. Suddenly that's your brain being like, shut up, spinal cord.
Yeah. Well, the brain's probably going,
right
don't
up.
walk, because you've got this tendon that's just hanging on by a thread that will snap and, really be
Joseph Gilbert's just put a comment here, which I absolutely love, and this is something that I've always get, which is like empathetic pain, which is basically, he's saying now my shin hurts, haha, which is basically like even listening to someone's story, like that's, you can, when you like can be in that like that brain space, if you're really empathetic to what that would feel like, sometimes you'll actually start to feel these like weird sensations and what could be described as pain. And there's no damage there, but you still will be constantly getting information on your shin. It might be just like a slight breeze. You'll have information at that level of, So again, this is imagining Joseph. I'm not sure where Joseph lives. He could be on the other side of the world listening to this. So now suddenly he's now like getting the temperature, the, light touch, all the sensation, information that he'd usually be getting is now suddenly switched up, because the context in his brain is now in the imagining Yanni falling off a mountain bike and degloving his shin. So that's just a really great example of just how powerful the brain is, and how it's totally a experience of the brain, not damage.
100%. And still to this day, when if I get a massage therapist or someone touch that area of my body on my shin, it like freaks me out.
Exactly.
It's just
and that's
so sensitive.
So desensitization for things like burns and scars is a real, like that's a treatment modality where you basically, and that's a good time to, I could talk about this all day, and I know I don't want to, but basically like, this is where like manual therapy and massage and, adjustments become people find benefit from it, because basically what you're doing is you're putting a controlled stimulus on an area that is otherwise painful. So, when you're just getting like random sort of shin pain from this old scar, or your back, now suddenly if I massage it, that's a controlled stimulus that will basically recontextualize what it feels like to be touched there. And so that then turns down the perceived threat, because you're like, hey, I'm in control of this stimulus, or I have a medical person touching it, so therefore it's safe.
It's okay,
and therefore that now desensitizes you to other information that would then be perceived as pain. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's wild. Look, hey, I just had in Facebook, it showed up on my thing as a reminder the other day. It took about, I don't know, 8 weeks of rehab to learn to walk again after that, because I had 3 operations and I was in hospital for quite a while, and then in and out of hospital for quite a while, and it was quite a big deal at the time. And it popped up in my news feed, hey, remember this? I was in there with a bunch of physios, and I'm learning how to plantarflex and dorsiflex and stabilize my foot and walk again. And I was on crutches for ages, and I was like, my God. And it sort of like, it just reminded me. And I went on a huge walk on the weekend, and for a moment there, I was like, fearful, memorizing this thing that happened in my foot, going, oh geez, am I going to be able to walk this far? We're walking about 15 Ks, it's really funny the way the brain works, and it's really important for you guys to understand that the role the brain plays in all of this, and just how much it can get in the way of you guys being human, being you, achieving your true potential. And achieving your true potential in life requires you to exercise and stimulate your body in such a way that you evolve, not devolve, which is a word. I haven't made that up. And
yeah, exactly. And that training, that movement in the right, like, will create a context in your brain, which you then can start to move away from pain. So with chronic pain, it's they actually just did a study about whether or not listening to a 2-hour really great lecture on pain science will make you like have less pain versus a sham intervention, which is basically talking to a physio for 2 hours. And basically, they had the same experience. So even just talking to someone, like, they both kind of improved. Yep. But even just talking to a physio apparently does the same job as in the moment for your pain experience. But what it kind of what this was Lorimer Mosley's study, and basically he's kind of come to the conclusion, like, they did have a bunch of other benefits from doing that around sense of fragility and all this stuff, but the study wasn't powered to scientifically show it. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But basically, the takeaway is that learning about this stuff is really important. It's really important to understand this, but it's not going to make you feel better right now. But what it can do is guide your actions moving forward. And if you are someone who, has been in persistent pain for a long time, and you've chosen like, oh, this might be like, I'd like to kind of get back to doing that thing I used to like I used to love going for bushwalks, but now, I just know I'll like get a gammy knee or whatever for after a certain amount of time, or you've stopped training in the gym because, you're scared of deadlifts. Like, this information should guide you towards working with someone who can take you on a journey, do it in a context that you feel safe and you feel, confident, and that's how you get out of long-term pain. It won't happen instantly, but if you're someone who's in chronic pain, being like, oh, I always hurt all the time, like there will be times throughout the day when you're distracted, by a happy thing or a sad thing, and you'll forget about your pain for a little while, and that should hopefully give you a bit of hope that like, okay, yeah, it's not that something is damaged and permanently causing me pain. There's little windows there where I'm pain-free, and what you've got to do is just keep opening those windows by providing the context to get better. Yeah.
There you go, guys. Look, let's send some love, massive love to Joe Gable. I think he broke the like button in this stream. Yeah, it's, great to see you on the stream, Jody. Joseph Gilbert, thanks for your interaction and love.
I love that, Jody, but also kind of feeling the empathy pain over there in the shin.
That's right. Lee Clements we had. Lots of love sent back to you. Everyone who was on the stream today. Thanks, Mitchell, tuning in all the way from Belgium. I hope you get some sleep now, brother. And who else do we have on there? Oh, we're sending love to everybody, all right? We got to bring this one in for a landing. We got a really big series this week. We love talking about this stuff. Make sure you tune in. Anyone who's experiencing any sort of pain or injury, or if you're not, it's just a great way to level up.
Yeah, particularly as you who do have persistent pain, like that's, I think, a really, that's the... Tell us about your stories, because I think it's a really interesting thing to explore. Yeah, absolutely. Remember the question today. We're going to go and keep that going. If you've got an injury or you're dealing with some sort of pain anywhere in your body right now, there's not much we can do about relationship pain, but pain, physical pain, we certainly can talk about. And Joseph Gilbert did give us a bit of information about a bit of shoulder pain that he's had doing the foundations, doing shoulder presses with elbows flared out. I'd say if you are feeling discomfort with flared out, so basically elbows facing out, bring him into neutral for a little while. 100%. Build up the strength in that sort of generally easier range, and then if you feel so inclined, then start to go for elbows out. But really do bring them into neutral, and that should take a bit of discomfort out of there. And I don't know. I have to revisit the foundations. We don't do flared out. We try to keep the arm as neutral as possible. So maybe let us know if there's any video in there that's telling you to flare your elbows out. I want to know about it. Yeah. And he's asking what rotator cuff injuries feel like, but just basically pain in and around the the shoulder. Fairly superficial, but and rotator cuff pain I've found can sort of radiate out into other areas. I've certainly experienced like a little bit of symptomatic pain down the tricep, down the back of my arm, sometimes around the back of the shoulder, sometimes even up into the neck because of the supraspinatus. So it can sort of bum steer you a little bit. But what we do know is that if we just get out of its way and let it heal, it will do its job. Yeah, you're saying, it was neutral, and you told me my elbows were out too much. So, just good. Bring them in, keep shoulders back and down, chest tall. Good stuff, guys. And according to Joe Gable, buy some Dogecoin. Hot tip. Not going to go down that rabbit hole. We will see you all tomorrow, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Richie. Have a great day. Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, it's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that far.
It's the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.